Well, hi there. Thanks for listening and watching, or listening and watching to Podcast is Broken. My name is Brittlestar. Not really.
My name is Steve Boots. Also not really.
My name is Lisa. Really.
Oh, wow. Always giving up the truth. It's exciting. We were just discussing before we started recording that sadly, if you are listening to this podcast or watching this podcast in Australia, you're the only one. We've dropped right out of the charts in Australia.
We've truly betrayed our Australian audience.
We have. Crikey.
We made an impact. That's
They're
all
really
that
feeling down under.
Oh my God. Ouch. Ouch. Dad joke Sunday.
All right. Let's rein it in.
For our Australian friends, I have an Australian/adjacent fun fact. There's a new Tasmanian-based AI called Tasman AI, which is literally just you put in a command and a dude in Tasmania does what you say. It is a real thing.
Like a chore thing? Like
paint me a picture of this, and a guy will just draw a picture of that.
That's pretty cool.
Like one guy? One guy in Australia?
I'm not Tasmania, but I'm not 100% sure how it works. Wow. But Tasman AI thing.
This AI thing has gone crazy, hasn't it? He's coming for the jobs of AI, is what he's coming for.
Exactly.
Today we're going to talk about a couple of things, but first we wanted to talk about the passing of former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, and this came to me. I thought we should talk about it, and it's been kind of done to death, of course, by lots of politicos and nerds in Canada and elsewhere, and but I felt that I made a comment on Twitter saying, that he was perhaps from a long forgotten time of civility, and he would you could disagree, or he might disagree, whatever, you could disagree with him, but he wouldn't trade on vitriol and sort of like nonsense type comments. And then a couple of people took issue with that. I know that David Musgrove, who's of course a writer and Politico nerd, he basically referenced people talking about how it was a long forgotten time of civility and said that we were idiots, which is fine. That's the relationship I have with David, so that's okay. It's all
He's
good.
known for subtle opinions.
I love him to death,
right?
So it's all good. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. What's your take on his legacy? Because I remember at the time not liking him, but he does feel like he's from a different age.
So I think it's a really important. I think it's an important question to ask, because I think it says a lot about politics now. Because politics has always been sort of politics. People have always played games. There's always been sort of half-truths and misleads and all of those things. But politics has never felt quite as cynical as it feels now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like the 24-hour news cycle has poisoned that and turned it into a soundbite factory a little more. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people sort of view Mulroney as one of the last sort of true statesmen or whatever, in part just because he just wasn't on camera as much. But I think also in part just because the tone of the time was they were being just as shady. They were just far more artful about it.
Right. I think that's what sticks out to me, is that there was an artfulness to it. It's like, yeah, are they on the take? Yes, but they look good doing it. That was at least, Well,
this is it. Mulroney accepted briefcases full of money, not burlap sacks with dollar signs on them.
Right. Yeah. Classy.
An important distinction.
I think it's because they all wore suits back then all the time. I made a similar commentary. I made a video, and I wasn't speaking to the accomplishments of Mr. Mulroney. I was doing a comparison to what politics looked like then versus what politics looks like now. I refer to it as the X factor of what we have now. Mm. And people were not happy. People were like, but he did this. And I know he did a lot of bad things. I'm not saying he was a great prime minister. And maybe it is because we don't see it often. We didn't see all the shady deals in the background. We knew they were there. It's just a different time. But I think the outwards to the public conversations between politicians at that time, and not just Mulroney, but we had Ed Broadbent, we had John Turner, we had Joe Clark, we had all these people involved. it just didn't give me the ick factor that we get now. I think that's the comparison I was making.
But do you think there is some element of rose-colored glasses to this? Like, in that time period, like, there was, maybe there was less vitriol, but the actual harms were worse. Like, the FLQ crisis happened during this time, or not just before this time. The Oka crisis happened during this time. Like, Mulroney oversaw the single largest deployment of Canadian troops since Korea, if I've got the number right. Like, and it was against Canadians. Like, things were ugly in a different way. Like, people in politics got murdered during that time period in a way that didn't happen right now.
I think there's that aspect of not having access to as much information back then. So you only got what made it to the newspaper, what made it to TV news. Whereas now we're kind of, as you said, like this 24-hour news cycle, which is, I mean, it's even well beyond that. It's it's down to the second news cycle. And I often think of like the question about can you still like the art if you don't like the artist? And it kind of applies in the same way. Whereas, we know so much about artists these days. There are all these intricate, intimate details, and it can make you not like them, and then make you think, oh, well, I'm not going to listen to their music anymore, or whatever, or watch their movies. Compared to, back in the day, like Lord Byron. I mean, if you imagine Lord Byron did some banging poetry, but also did some other terrible stuff. And if there was social media, you'd be like, nah, listen, man, I don't care how good the poems are. This is guys he's gone to. We can't support this. So it's an interesting argument about, is it just because we know too much? Do you think it's? But I don't know. I don't think that's the answer though, because when I look at someone like Poilievre, or I look at even someone like Andrew Scheer, there's some other politicians I can name that are not just conservative but largely conservative. That I think to myself, it just seems like there's an undermining of the belief in the country in Canada. That is trying to be done for their own purposes, and I don't think it's thought out properly or well enough.
So I heard this explained to me really well by a PR person at some conference somewhere that I cannot remember the specifics of, where they basically said that the average person in Canada has an incoherent ideology, and I think that's a difference that's emerged in the last 30, 40 years, more than I think throughout history. And I think a big part of that's, we can talk about how the sort of collapse of the journalism industry and a bunch of other things, but I think what it really comes down to is people are viewing things in very reactionary ways. People are picking their opinions issue by issue. People are attaching to individual politicians instead of any actual sort of ideal or philosophy. Like, philosophically, all three major parties are pretty close to one another.
Yeah.
And so I think that ideological incoherence is a big part of it. That people just are reacting to everything. And so they look to their politicians for reactions rather than any sort of actual ideals. And it leads to really short-sighted policies that are really exclusionary and really clearly just meant to win short-term votes.
But that reaction in the moment, so maybe that's part of the issue, is that because we see the Poilievres and we see everybody go and do their pressers on the daily, right? Bringing out stacks of paper for effect. And we didn't see that back then, right? Politicians came out randomly. They came out when there were debates. They came out when they were leaving Parliament. But we didn't have the social media aspect of things. We didn't have people reporting. We didn't have flags being flown. So maybe that's why it seems like it was a daintier time in politics. Certainly we know all the backroom stuff. But back then, did you vote for the party or did you vote for the person? And what does that look like now? Are we voting for the party or are we voting for the person?
I don't know. I mean, I think you could argue or make the argument that, back in the Pierre Elliott Trudeau days, the PET days, I mean, that was definitely people voting for him. There was a kind of a mania around him. And there's also really interestingly an attraction to the fact that he didn't play by the rules. He was, what did you say in the House of Commons? I said fuddle-duddle. And giving the finger to, to reporters and stuff. People thought, wow, that's cool. Not everyone thought it was cool, but some people did. And it's interesting because it's kind of the same irreverence that it's the nicest way of putting it is saying it's irreverence. When you see someone like Poilievre or Scheer, or that style of politics, or Trump in the States, or Boris Johnson when he was going in the UK, that kind of irreverence and that kind of like rebel thing, like it's us versus them, and I'm one of you, and you're quite evidently not one of me. But was there a decorum still that has been abandoned entirely? I mean, I think it still exists in some cases, but I mean, to me, it puts me off when I see, and I'm being long-winded about this, sorry, but being Canadian, sorry. But I think it's like
wistful.
I'm waxing. And I think it's interesting because I think that that lack of decorum is not attractive to me. I think it's like, I want you to be professional in this. This is a very important job you have. There's a lot of theatrics in it. There's a lot of stupidity in it, and stupid stuff in it. However, at the end of the day, it's a very, very important thing that they're doing on the whole. So take it seriously. But at the same time, I also kind of want to go, like I've been to events in Ottawa where you'll see people across party lines, saying hi, asking how the family's doing, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, I kind of want that. I kind of want you guys to like argue with each other about the important stuff. And then when it's like time to take the gloves off, just be like, okay, not to put the glove back on or whatever you want to say. I don't know hockey metaphors, hockey analogies. I don't know.
When you toggle the condition of the gloves.
When you toggle the condition of the gloves, that's what they say in hockey, isn't it?
That's as they say.
Exactly. But I want them to be like, we're both in the service of Canada. We're both in the service of the country. And we want what's best for the country. We might disagree about how to get there, but we want what's best for the country. I don't know if I feel that anymore.
I have a very mixed feeling about this. I don't know if you saw, like, I'm not going to sit here and endorse him because he's a mixed figure, but that the fellow who just won the by-election in Scotland, Rochdale, I want to say. His name's Galloway. He's an independent and part of a workers' party. And he's like this incredibly frank speaker. And his ideas are mixed, like I said, but he's very good at not letting the reporter dictate sort of the context of the question. Like, he was being asked to respond to Rishi Sunak's comments, and he refused. And he was told, said, like, you're acting very disrespectful. And he's like, well, I don't respect him. He's doing this, he's doing this, he's doing this. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think respectability politics has to some degree stopped us from telling the truth about people. Like, I'm sorry, when people are doing things that I feel are really egregious, I don't respect that. And I feel like there's almost this sort of expectation or requirement to respect people even if they're doing things that aren't respectable. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I won't. I'm trying to think of a hockey analogy. I can't.
Something with gloves. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sticks, pucks. Yeah, I'm trying to differentiate between, obviously I'm not a fan of Poilievre. And he is the one, says Harper, that is taking the Conservative Party in a certain direction, right? But when you break down the leader from the party and the party values, like, is it the leader? Because we've seen the Conservative Party has had multiple turnovers in leaders over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So who's driving that ship, really? Like, is it the leader that is imposing certain things onto the party? I mean, for example, Pierre went through his whole gender identity and what kids shouldn't be told. And there are people who sit as part of that party that should be offended at what he's saying.
Sure.
But they toe the line. For the party or for the leader? That's the question. I mean, back in the day, like I said, when you think about, Ed Broadbent or Mulroney, like, that was the leader of the party. It was synonymous, right? It was one and the same.
Sure.
Now I feel like Poilievre has that conservative umbrella, but he's on it. Like he's rogue. He's rogue at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it's like a battle in my brain of like, would the Conservative Party still have the same values if it wasn't this leader? Chicken or the egg? That's what I'm asking. Chicken or the egg?
Yeah, I mean, you could say the same thing about the Liberals with Trudeau. I mean, I think it's very much, at least that's how it's packaged and presented, is that it's very much this guy leading the ship, steering the ship. What's a maritime analogy? My analogies are gone today.
Paddling the ship. Go with paddling.
Slap-shotting the ship.
Rowing the ship.
Slap-shotting the ship. And you could make that argument that he was doing that same type of thing where he's dictating what's happening. But I think that's also part of the political game. I mean, that's one of the reasons I could never imagine being part of a party is for that reason. It's like I can't get behind everything. Which I mean, I know that's not effectual to do that either.
But is he dictating? Because I saw an interview that he did talking, and it's relevant to Alberta because when we're talking about climate change and, my province is just like a Stephen Guilbeault, is Justin sitting there in his office, like signing off on everything? Or do you put people in the positions where you think that they have the knowledge, the authority to make those decisions under the umbrella of what the party would believe? But he's not signing off on what Guilbeault's doing. Mm-hmm. He's got people to do that, right? And so, but that's the question. Is that happening in other parties? Because all we see is Poilievre. We don't see anybody else really.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest that every party has like pretty strong centralization of authority these days. But it's not really just in the leaders, right? Like party executives and party senior leadership hold massive amounts of sway. Like any one of those individual positions is like trying to steer the Titanic in a lot of cases. Like it's hard to turn fast, right? But I think one of the problems that you wind up with, and this has happened with every conservative leader, I would say basically going back to since Harper, this happened with Scheer, this happened with O'Toole, and it's happening with Poilievre. They have to say a certain set of things to get nominated as leader and to get put forward as leader. But then what happens is they wind up in front of this base that demands rigid compliance. They need to be on the, angry side of every culture war du jour. And the second that they're not exactly towing that line that's expected them from the most extreme elements of the party, they get things tear apart fast. And so I think that's kind of where Poilievre is right now, where like he's fighting to hold on to that extreme base and to maintain their expectations. So I think they're driven by the reactionary base to some very large extent. Whereas when you look at the Liberals, they're driven by what consultants tell them to do. Like when Justin Trudeau decides what color of drapes to put in the new mansion, he'll have to hire a $5 million committee to do so.
But he picks his own socks, so there you go.
That's right. I mean, when you think of Mulroney and stuff, and as you're relating it to like Poilievre and stuff, as we are, it seems to be the other side of the coin of populism as well, right? That idea of like especially populism combined with social media, where there's an emphasis on reaction as opposed to, and a reward for reaction as opposed to being proactive with something. Proactive, just sticking your neck out there and someone's going to take a swing at you. Reactionary is great because it's easy to knock something. It's super simple and whatever. So, with Mulroney, do you think we see him as like more of a statesman, more of a calm guy, more of a whatever, gentleman as such, because he couldn't necessarily hear that kind of effective populism as readily as, the current governments can?
I mean, to some degree, but I think there's also something to be said for the fact that he was phenomenally unpopular when he left.
Yeah.
He was by a wide margin the least popular prime minister's ever been.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I think history has afforded him rose-colored glasses because a lot of politicians since him have sort of withered on the vine, right? They have stuck around either in opposition or stayed in the public eye quite a bit. The ones who have really gotten that lionized legacy are the ones who just basically disappeared. Like Chrétien, after he stepped down, he stepped down, if I'm remembering right.
Mm-hmm.
Basically largely disappeared from public life. He'd pop up every now and then to give a soundbite, and Mulroney would pop up every now and then to put his son on eTalk Live or whatever it was. But
don't diss Ben.
Ben is lonely.
But the point is, he largely sort of froze his legacy then. And I think people remember the man, but they forget the actions the further back things get. So, like, people remember him in the suit and waving and all that stuff, and they remember less and less of, like, you know, the Meech Lake Accords and all that stuff. That was
Charlottetown,
and the introduction of and GST and all that kind of stuff. I remember when GST came in, I remember everyone being upset about it, and talk about a tax. I mean, that was a huge blanket tax that varied wildly in real dollars. And I remember a friend of mine got their GST rebate, and was so angered he just wrote, he wrote something terrible on the envelope and said, "Dear Brian," and then wrote something terrible and then just threw it back in the mail. And it was like money. It was free money.
Yeah.
But he didn't want it, and that's how angry. But that's what makes me wonder, and maybe it's just a case with all politicians everywhere, or if it's maybe more global than just national. But that you look at someone like Mulroney, who was tremendously unpopular when he was in office, did lots of things people were upset about, and then he passes away and everyone goes, God, I'd do anything to have him back right now. You know what I mean? It's like the Americans with Trump, and then going, George W. wasn't that bad, was he? He seems like a fun guy to hang out with.
But when you compare it to what you got, that's the problem.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to say. Oh God, I get so excited I pull my headphones out.
Relax.
Do you think a lot of it has to do with sort of the politics of charisma? Like, we have, like, regardless of your opinions about his, policies, Pierre Poilievre does not seem like a likable dude. Like, he doesn't seem like somebody you could chit chat with. He seems like somebody who would talk over you the entire time. And I think there's a level of charisma that you see in some of those past conservative leaders that a lot of current conservatives look to and say, like, man, wouldn't it be great if he just seemed like a nice guy?
Yes.
But is that why, when we we had Harper, and then we see Scheer, and we see O'Toole, when they were leaders, like, even they changed their persona while they were leaders, right? Like, I remember O'Toole on the front of whatever it was, McLean's, in his t-shirt, outside of the suit, right? And so were they trying
with the Photoshop muscles?
Right, the ones that Pierre has now. But that's the thing. It's like they're put in this position of power, and like you said, they have to speak to their base, but they also haven't stayed the course of who they are. And it makes me wonder, do they know who they are? Does Pierre know who he is? Because he's gone from, like, being, I'm going to say, the bookworm view of who he is to now with the t-shirts and the jeans and trying to, like, make it. You never saw Brian Mulroney in jeans. So is there a higher expectation, or is it just because we see them so often in everyday life now that they can't have that persona that's sort of untouchable? Like, they're all over all the time.
I think that's some part of it, but I also think they're like, that's also very intentionally presented these days, right? Like, that formality was an expectation of politicians back then, and the casualness is like an expectation of politicians these days. So, like, those shots of, like, as much as Poilievre drives me nuts, he does in those photos seem like a guy who genuinely does spend time with his family and likes his kids, right? Like, and that's very much by design. And so, like, I just remember, who was it? But, like, they present those images on purpose to give a certain image of him.
Of course, family dude.
But that's changed, right? People used to expect their politicians to be these very resigned, sort of formal, sort of dudes. Like I vividly remember people losing their marbles at Stockwell Day in the jet ski wetsuit. But like even before that, like was it Robert Stanfield who like bobbled catching a football and that was enough to sort of derail his campaign one year?
Right.
Like politicians were expected to look and act a very buttoned down sort of a way, and now we expect something very different. We expect sort of an accessibility of them.
But Pierre Elliott wasn't like that. I mean, the dude had swagger, right? And there were always pictures of his family, right? He wasn't this, single identity in politics.
Which I mean, I think that kind of goes. I think you're totally right, Lisa, and I think that kind of almost proves Steve's point in a sense as well, because I think about the people who didn't like Pierre Trudeau, and they are very much the people who wanted their politicians to be staid and resolute and distanced and above the melee of changing diapers and family and all that kind of stuff. And I think you could see a change happening like that. And I think you remember back when Stephen Harper was prime minister and he shook his son's hand as he went off to school, and everyone went, "Oh God, what's that?" And then I remember watching Aaron O'Toole, poor Aaron O'Toole, and he was watching, I think maybe the Raptors. I'm thinking maybe something on television. I can't remember. It was one of your sports games, as you know, I'm such a big fan of. And but he was in a full suit. Sports. He was in a full suit, and everyone was like, "Nah, that's."
But you can't trust this guy.
Is it just like is it a definition of celebrity that's like has politicians just become more celebrities, and then we think back to Mulroney and we just think of like the celebrity type stuff that he did and not the other stuff? I mean, you think of him singing "Irish Eyes Are Smiling" with Ronald Reagan or something.
I think they were more celebrities back then. Now I think they're trying to be more Joe Public,
right.
Which I get it, right? You want to associate yourself with the people that are going to be voting for you. It just seems so fake. Like Stockwell Day with the jet ski seems so put on, right? And so when you see Pierre or whoever doing things, like my mind goes to, would he be doing that if there were no cameras there? And if there were no cameras there, and I get it, everything's a photo op and everything's, to prove your point. But that's sort of what I look at. Would this guy be swinging his kids with his wife?
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, like when you see Trudeau, Justin, winging his way over to somebody's dock in a canoe, you're like, damn it, that's exactly the kind of thing he'd do. And it would drive you insane, but you're like, well, thank you for your help. No, get the hell out of here. Quit making me look like an idiot.
Leave me alone. Yeah.
Curses.
Yeah.
Do you think that to some degree it has to do with the expectations of politicians being a little scattered? Like, I think there's one group of people who expect celebrity from their politicians, and then another group who expect them to be policy wonks. And I think the problem that you face is the policy wonks are out there. There's lots of them in politics. They get no camera time. They get no interview time.
No.
And in many cases, they actually don't have the freedoms to speak openly about policy ideals, because it's all about soundbite harvesting and, decontextualizing things. Do you think something like, I feel like the expectations are so scattered that it's very hard to find politicians who are able to present both?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I think it's more marketing now than maybe it used to be in a sense. I mean, what was the Ike thing? Like Ike?
I like Ike.
I like Ike.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was sort of the that was like seen as masterful marketing for politics back in the day, which would not cut it. Printing up a couple of buttons that say, "I do Trudeau," or something like that is just not going to cut it. You need to get them out there rescuing people in canoes and stuff.
You need stickers for the back windows of trucks.
Exactly.
Or things that wave in the wind.
Exactly.
But they're the face of the party. They have to be received well, right? I mean, obviously they have backgrounds of knowledge and things of the like. But if they're a horrible human being, are they going to get elected? Are people going to resonate with that if the leader or the face of the party doesn't match the ideals that they believe the party should have? You know what I mean? Like if I often wonder, the people who are supporting Poilievre, do they actually like Poilievre? Or do they just like the fact that it's, not the NDP, not the Liberals, and we'll take whatever we can get despite that?
I think that a big chunk of the Canadian electorate are reactionary voters. They vote for a party,
Yes.
they run with that party for 2-3 elections, and then they switch parties. And that's sort of been the cycle, right? Like, basically since the 80s, it's been a couple of elections of a conservative-leaning government, and then a couple of elections of a center-leaning government, and then lather, rinse, repeat. And that looks to be fairly likely where we're heading again. I think maybe a part of the problem here is that politics has basically just been, badmintoning those groups of people back and forth for so long. And the NDP kind of wander behind them saying, hey, what about us, guys? And nobody is really showing any interest in the 40 to 50% of people who just aren't voting. And I think that's a part of the issue too, is that all of these political acts that you see and all of these sort of political theatrics, they're to appeal to existing politicos. And so I don't know if anybody has found a way yet to really connect with ordinary people who are just kind of over it, who are not listening to the politics, who are not, tuning in to CPAC to see what bananagrams thing they're going to say next.
Why wouldn't they?
Oh, it's a real thrill.
Okay, so taking it back to Mulroney, so he was just absolutely hated when he left, but that's what split off into reform, right? So you had staunch conservatives that were like, this does not represent me anymore. We're going to go in this way. So, and now we don't have reform, we have the PPC. If that's still happening, where there's a branch off from the parties that people don't,
I feel we might see one with the Conservative Party currently. I think there's entirely a possibility that it could splinter.
I think there's always going to be one element of conservatism in Canada that is not really interested in the culture war stuff. And then one element that is, but also there's a second dividing line there's hardline libertarians and there's sort of small government folks. Right? And those hardline libertarians sometimes break off and form their own thing, be it reform or be it PPC. And basically the naked pursuit of power forces them to say, all right, fine, we'll work with you guys. Government's okay, I guess. And they form a coalition. The coalition falls apart invariably. And we're back to square one. Politics in Canada follows some very predictable cycles.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it goes down to the idea that it's just a pendulum. It just goes back and forth. People just get tired. And also to your point of how people not necessarily getting involved, and there's the policy wonks and the politicos that are really into it, and then there's the other 97% of the population who are like, listen, I'm worried about paying my bills. I'm worried about getting to work. I'm worried about getting the kids into school, blah, 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 and this is what I'm worried about. I don't have time to pore over this stuff, whether they do or not, and they should. However, it's totally understandable that they wouldn't do that. But is that, speaking back to Mulroney, is that because in Mulroney's day, prior to social media, prior to having this up to the second news cycle, was it because we felt there was really only maybe 1 to 3 issues that they were working on? There was probably a multitude of things they were doing, but it did seem like, well, there's the Meech Lake Accord. This is what this election's about. Whereas I think this election coming up in Canada next year is there's people, you could ask 100 people and get 50 to 100 different answers.
Isn't it about axing the tax?
I
don't know.
But that's what gets people, when they have those taglines, right? That's what he's trying to do, is the people who maybe aren't politicos, don't spend their time breaking things down. You get these sound bites that go off and they're like, yes, that reaches me, right? And that's where the Liberals have not done a good job and better step up their game if they even hope to try and make a dent, because, and I get it, they're busy running the country. They don't have time to be touring Canada with their little sideshow, but it's Pierre is making that ground because he's getting with the people and spewing his little sound bites.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a little bit of wind out of his sails. I don't think he's getting with the people. I think he's just really good at marketing. I think he's genius at marketing in a sense because, working in social media, for me, my goal is always to cut through the noise. And that idea of when you're putting something out there, you're competing with every other piece of content, news, personal, whatever that people are putting out there. You're competing with all that. So you really have to do something to stand out. And I think the great example of that for Polyev was eating the apple with that reporter guy. Doesn't matter what he said, doesn't matter anything about it, because that's something that is easy to parcel up and put in your head if you don't pay attention to the news and go, oh, I saw that clip, that was funny. And you might not know anything else about the guy. And you're exactly right. I feel the Liberals have been doing an abysmal job at making themselves cut through the noise. I mean, they're like, listen, look, this is a fantastic bill. We're doing this and this, and it's going to mean this and this, and it's going to be 4 points. And everyone's like, yeah, boil it down to like one. Can you like eat a fruit or something?
Give me a picture. Yeah, exactly.
I think part of it is the Liberals have had this internal belief for a long time now that if you're explaining, you're losing. Mm. And at a certain point, you need to explain, guys. Clearly, people do not understand a lot of the things that you are trying to accomplish. You are not doing a good job of telling the stories of the things that you've accomplished, but also they haven't done a great job of improving the material conditions of people's lives. Mm. Like, did they navigate COVID pretty well? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is the past for that over? Yeah. Mm. And so what are they doing? Like, we're in pretty serious affordability crises and cost of living crises. We're looking at healthcare issues across Canada. And I think a lot of Canadians are feeling like they're not doing much to directly affect that. And so that makes it so easy for an outsider, like Poilievre to just say, like, we're going to fix this all because he's bad. Because it's pretty easy to explain why things are bad. Like, that's not a hard sell. Most people just need to look at their bank accounts and know that things are pretty rough.
Sure.
And so for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals to stand there and say, no, things aren't that bad. You may be experiencing things being bad. You're wrong, not us. Right? Like, that's a pretty hard sell. So you got to remember, like, yeah, the Conservatives are killing it with marketing right now. Full credit. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd rather not give it to them, but
yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's an easier story to tell. Right? Things are bad versus no, they aren't. One of those has reality on its side.
But for things that they've done, so like the money that they gave the province for improvements in healthcare or affordable housing or whatever it is that they're doing, make it a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Say, here's our pot of money that we're bringing to your province. This is what we expect. Lay it on the provinces if they're not delivering, but advertise what you're doing that people can go, oh, okay, well, maybe I can anticipate something good happening, right? A lot of it is, bigger picture stuff. We need 2-3 more years to actually get it done, but put some good pictures out there.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
You know what one of the big issues with that is, though? What provinces do you feel like Justin Trudeau could confidently go and campaign on the ground right now?
Oh, yeah, but he snuck into Alberta. Get some good shots.
You get the problem, though, right? Like,
yeah,
it's tough. Where does he go that he doesn't get booed and jeered?
Oh, he doesn't have to do like the Poilievre green screen thing. I don't care about that, but I'm just like, put some good advertisements out there on buses about what you're doing. Because
I agree.
When we come to 2025, people are going to remember Axe Attack, Bring It Home, all that other kind of crap, with no foundations for it. But it's easy to go out with those sound bites when everybody's blaming the people that are in power right now. So I think they should stuff on a bus.
I'm going to give them a free slogan right now, and it should just be in response to, like, for example, the daycare, $10 a day childcare, and being stymied by the provinces essentially for getting that going. And I think that you're right. They need to come forward and say, we've done this. The last hurdle is the provincial government. So make sure you contact your MPPs and let them know. Let's get to work. I think this should. Let's get to work. Just take that. That's all yours, Justin. It's free. But I think that's exactly it. It's like, it's my one takeaway from political studies, apart from the fact that you have to cite your arguments. You have to make citations. Really. I mean, It was I thought my argument was good. Why do I need to tell you?
I could ramble about Chicago-style citations for hours.
Oh well, let's not. It's a sore point for me.
That.
But I think one of my takeaways from that was William Lyon Mackenzie King, known for doing no more really than any other prime minister, but telling you every time he did anything. And it was like, yeah, I think we kind of have to get into that moment. Like this is we're doing this. Yes, we're doing this. And just little tiny little bits that are going to cut through the noise. All right. So I'm just going to change gears for us for a little bit. A little bit of a segue. And we're going to just agree the fact that Mulroney was an elder statesman and he'll be sorely missed. I just spoke for all you. He'll be.
For those of you who are watching, the Tuke blew right off.
I will shuffle awkwardly in my seat and let that statement wander past.
He'll be sorely missed by a number of people. Just as a quick segue into people having to decide what to do when they're voting and knowing more about what they're voting for and all that kind of stuff. I was watching, this is Van Culler with Mo Amir, and he had what's the Conservative Party called? I mean, it's the Conservative Party of British Columbia, but it's not. They're not affiliated with the Conservative
United, I want to say.
Yeah, something. Yes,
something like that.
And one thing I thought was hilarious was this guy was on there saying how basically the federal conservatives have stolen a bunch of their ideas, like common sense. That was one thing that was stolen. I was like, yeah, that's never been done before. You're right.
Yeah,
you guys
no politician has ever claimed to be a common sense politician.
You can just imagine Scheer and Poilievre going, did you hear that thing from BC about this? What was it? Common sense. Oh my God, that's amazing. But then the funniest thing to me was, and this is what I wanted to ask you a question about, segueing out of this whole idea of populism, reactionary stuff, and people not knowing enough. They wanted to put every new tax up for referendum. Every time they want to increase the tax rate, they want to have a referendum on the tax. Like, do you want this or not? I think that's the dumbest idea in the world. How do we feel about that?
People have a lot of time on their hands. Alberta's big on referendums too as of late, but read the room, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to put something out that may be controversial, as government, you get to make that decision, right? You get to do what's in the best interest of your constituents or of the residents of your province. But when you're putting stuff up to referendum, generally, for people who may or may not understand the topic at hand, that is that's dangerous. I find that dangerous, quite honestly. So
a big part of representative democracy is having people whose job it is to see the larger public interest and the greater good and sort of have a larger context to this, because for an individual person like you or I, it's hard to think beyond our personal pocketbooks. We need people who sit slightly separately from that and have an interest in the collective.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's the actual case. Doesn't always seem to be, but
But yeah, I mean, it just seems so dumb to me because I thought it's a hard sell getting people to vote on big issues. Never mind saying, we're going to raise the tax by 4% and it's going to fix some roads that you'll never use. So you guys cool with that? You'd be like, no, I don't want to pay for that. And then you end up with these crazy situations. I remember living in Kingston, Ontario, and it was the first real world hard example of the realities of budgeting, where they ran out of money because they used it all up in the snow plowing budget one year. And then come spring, they're like, yeah, we don't have any extra money in the tax base to mow the lawns. And everyone went, yeah. And then come July, the grass was like 3.5 feet tall, which is, people I don't think that people are that smart. I don't have any faith in humanity.
I'm with you, brother. In Alberta, we have the Alberta pension plan idea that was put forward, and it always said, we're going to go to referendum. Now, I believe they thought that it was going to be an easy sell, but send it to referendum, and then we blame it on the people, not the government putting it through, right? You guys voted for it. when it looked like that wasn't the case, all of a sudden everything's on pause. So it depends on what you're using a referendum for. Are you using it because as a government, you want to put forward ideas that you know would be unpopular, but if you sell it enough and people vote for it and you get your base out to vote for it, then you can put that blame on somebody else. And it wasn't us. We just did what the people told us to do. Because referendums generally are not great. Like they don't turn out great a lot of the time. So
I actually think Alberta has it wrong on a lot of different things, but it has it right on one thing, which is they rolled out recall elections. And I like that a lot better than a referendum. Now their recall system is weird and doesn't really work for a bunch of different reasons. But the idea of being able to recall politicians during their or in between electoral periods, I really like that, because the idea behind a referendum is accountable decision making, right? Like in most cases, a referendum is going to look at issues outside of the elected mandate of the government. And so if governments are deciding to go outside of their elected mandate, having a mechanism to remove them, I think is a lot more beneficial than just constantly going to direct democracy. Because direct democracy, like, the public is very reactionary. The public, look at Brexit. A lot of people voted in Brexit as a protest vote and went, whoops, it won.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like Mike Harris in Ontario getting voted in as premier and doing cutting everything he said he was going to cut. And people going, what the hell? It's like,
wait a minute.
People aren't smart enough. This is my whole thing. And I'm including all three of us here as well. I think that people are not smart enough to make these decisions because they've got too much other stuff going on in their lives. That's exactly as you said. We have people that we pay to spend their time learning about this stuff, and we trust them to make the right decisions. And if they're not making the right decisions or ones we're happy with, we turf them. We get rid of them, get new people in.
Exactly.
So speaking about that, you had mentioned, Steve, about because I was in the UK the past couple of weeks. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Whoa.
It's too hot in here.
Once again, the people listening at home, nothing has happened.
I love the rainbow.
People watching. It's terrifying for everybody.
Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
I'm just going to let it say it's fine.
The
Don't
cat
worry.
has chosen to make a cameo.
Oh, hi, baby.
That's for those of you that are just listening. It is an actual cat that's making a cameo, which is nice. But let's continue with. So, Steve, you had mentioned. Just pretend you can see me. It'll cool off eventually, just like I will. About me being in the UK the past couple of weeks, and then referring to King Charles, and then the question you had posed was,
what would you do if you were king? Like, what would you change about Canada if you could tip the scales of democracy and bring about a single given change? What would it be? I'm intrigued. The cat would say catnip for all.
Catnip for all. As Queen of Canada, I can't use that because there was some other stuff.
I don't know.
As Supreme God Emperor.
Right.
We're going Dune.
Just like full on whatever we want. I mean, that's not how it really works in the UK, but I get your drift. From a fairy tale perspective, I get the drift. I think it's hard because I would initially say something like, everyone gets housing, which seems like an easy one. It seems really good. But I'm also aware of, like, in the UK, about how that gets abused. And I think people are dirt. I think that's basically it. I would dictate that anyone who's dirt gets, I don't know, their head chopped off or something. No, that's too severe. Maybe just publicly mocked.
Oh, bring back what is that? The stalks?
Yeah, the stalks. Yeah, exactly.
Pointed laugh.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do with your squishy tomatoes?
Fair. It's hard to say because anything that you say can be manipulated, right? So, like, for me, as Supreme Ruler of Canada, I would say, mind your own goddamn business. Let people live the lives that they want to live. And if it doesn't impact you, be on your merry way. Now, you're going to have people come back and say, well, you want criminals to do whatever they want to do. Like, no, right? No. Like, you have to be specific. So, yeah, it's you have to put a caveat on everything nowadays because people are going to, like, turn it on. Just be nice people. Stop being assholes and just be nice people to other people.
Yeah, that's what I'm with you. I'm going to say that as well. My dictation from the throne is that everyone just has to be nice and not a jerk.
I love it. I love it. I am a firm believer. I see, if I was king for a day, I think a lot of Canada's problems come from just the way that we do politics around here and the way that people relate to one another. And I think electoral reform would help that a lot. But I also think that if I were king for a day, the first thing I would do is get rid of the fact that Canada has a king. I'm not a huge monarchist.
Not a monarchist.
And like, I know that it's very structurally entrenched in Canada and is not likely going anywhere anytime soon. So that's one thing that I'd love to be able to do, because it would force us to rethink a lot of our existing structures, which I think is worth doing. So yeah, as king, no more kings.
No more king.
The king is dead. Long live the king.
That's like the opposite of the.
Don't say that.
It's the opposite of the genie's wish. The genie in a bottle wish. For wishing for more wishes, you're wishing for less. My only wish is that I didn't have to do this.
Oh yeah, but of course I would be loved and revered as the one who ended the monarchy.
Well, until they came for you.
Right.
No, I would live a life of benevolent retirement
on our taxpayer money. Go to hell.
Like the old Pope.
The
guy who was just like, I'm done being Pope. Deuces.
Well, that was. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily say he was being a great guy for that. It made me raise my eyebrows. Like, all right, yeah. Listen, guys,
he's gonna keep cash in the checks.
I got to get out of here. I can feel the heat, and
this Pope thing isn't really what I was looking for.
Something might be coming down the pipe, and I'm out. Anyone seen my
somebody else a shot?
You got to see my Louis Vuitton shoes. I got to get out of here.
I got stuff going on. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, this has been fantastic. And even though I've been reduced to just a test color pattern or whatever I decide to put in there in post-production, probably that goofy graphic before, because it was kind of fun. I liked it.
Yeah,
is it the one of you looking past but not at a camera? I like that one.
Yeah, it's called art, Steve.
Professional photography. Oh, the dream.
The dream. But thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. And who knows, if you're in Australia, tell a few friends and we'll rock it into the charts again. I was bragging about the show actually, because our first episode, and obviously we've gone, quality has slipped tremendously since the first episode.
Yeah.
It's all downhill.
But it might come back up now, because maybe the key is my camera overheating. And maybe that's the key for
that's
popularity.
Just how we know that the heat of the moment has really just set things off.
So much. But I was bragging saying that
cannot handle Stuart's untamed heat.
We were number 2 in Canada news, which was great, right behind the New York Daily. Is that what it's called?
Hey.
But I mean, also I was like, come on, Canada, get over yourselves. Like, just
none of that's real. None of that.
I mean, New York Daily is the number 1 in Canada, and like this, we were above the CBC, which was at 3. I was like, oh, that's not right.
And we are not.
I feel conflicted about this.
Anyway, thanks so much for watching and listening, and make sure you subscribe and all that kind of stuff, and pop into the comments, because the comments, they go popping. They be popping. They be popping.
We read them.
That's right.
We do indeed.
Exactly. I'm too scared to get involved sometimes, but I might. You never know. Anyway.
I get an email notification every time we get one that I don't know how to turn off.
And you want to be king?
Acutely aware of these comments.
Oh, we got to do our theme song now. What's our theme song? We got who's doing what?
I came back from my holiday with new instruments.
Oh, nice.
Those
are maracas and not as testicles, everyone. Just want everyone to know that.
How do you know they're not both?
They could be both. And it's quite a stretch.
They're holiday balls. Okay, I'm ready.
Am I just singing again?
Looks to be.
That's what you do.
Okay. All right. So someone start me off. Podcast is broken. 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 Podcast is broken. We don't even
Not
practice
sponsored.
that. That's
Thanks
how we
for
get our
listening,
vitamin D.
folks.
Thanks. See
As
ya.
you can tell. Thank you. Bye.